This episode is proudly sponsored by Resilience Through Fitness. RTF's whole body health approach focuses on helping first responders get adequate rest, fuel, and physical preparedness for their challenging shifts serving the communities they love. The RTF coaching staff are all current first responders that have a passion for fitness. With one-on-one online coaching tailored specifically to your gym, home, and traveling needs, the staff strives to ensure that you come home safe at the end of the shift. RTF also donates a portion of select sales back to supporting veteran and first responder charities. Use the discount code GRITTY15 for 15% off your personalized coaching or next order online. That's GRITTY15 at resilience-through-fitness.com. All one word, resilience-through-fitness.com. Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tung. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities. Ladies and gents, welcome back to another episode. Today I have someone I've been connected with for a long time. I don't even know how long we've been trying to schedule something. I popped up on his show quite a while back, and this is just what happens when you have two first responders that have a lot of busy extracurriculars. But without further ado, thank you so much, Greg Grogan from the Overwatch Collective. Thanks for coming on the show, man.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. As we were exchanging emails between like last night and this morning about like, I'm fighting this cold. I don't know. I didn't know how I'd sound, and I'm just gonna roll with it. But at the same time, Greg got held over in classic fashion. So, but super excited because like you're basically like, hey, I'm good to go either way. So, long time coming. But man, I just want to ask you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and your background, man.
Yeah, so I'll make it short and sweet. I'm born and raised into a military and first responder family. Born in the Bay Area. Joined the United States Marine Corps at 18. Did 7.5 years. Been in the Coast Guard Reserves for 4 years and been a police officer for 10 years. Hold various positions: SWAT, motor, range instructor, drone dude, first aid, CPR, honor guard. Honestly, got involved in way too much stuff that it takes up all of my free time. But yeah, that's the quick down and dirty on me.
Yeah, that is pretty quick down and dirty. I'm impressed. Happy birthday, by the way, at the time of this recording. Not super far after Veterans Day and the Marine Corps birthday, which come together, of course. Man, so I'm gonna go off script a little bit, but that doing too much stuff thing, right? Like we kind of alluded to the fact that first responder work is a lot, and that's why I talk about wellness and prioritization and making time for family and thinking about your time off and being diligent about that. And then you have all the things you do. I mean, you just literally capped off a bunch of these extra duties, ancillary duties, of great importance, and some of them with huge time commitments, right? Like you could go from like honor guard to like extreme immeasurable importance, and then you have something like SWAT that takes a lot of extra training and call out and stuff like that. Like, how do you manage all that? Because I think a lot of people that listen in are those doers, and they're trying to find that right balance for themselves.
Yeah, and I'll say that they are not alone because I go through the same thing.
Yeah.
And in addition to just the first responder life is like the Coast Guard Reserves now, and even before it was the Marine Corps Reserves, where you always tell people like, oh, it's only 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks in the summer. And my drill weekend falls Friday, Saturday, Sunday, the third weekend of every month. And I work swing shift patrol Monday to Thursday. So I know we're not the brightest tools in the shed here, but yes, that means you're working Monday to Thursday police, Friday, Saturday, Sunday military, and then Monday to Thursday police. And then you tack on court. Tuesday, I had a traffic detail with like other motor officers in the county. Next Wednesday, I have motor training in the morning. So those are 16-hour days. Get held over last night. Obviously, you have to transition from police mode to military mode, which is different. Start time is 06:30 for military. Start time for my shift is 1300. So that is a separate challenge for me. But just the normal first responder, like my brother's a firefighter in Southern California, and he goes through the same thing. He's working, he's on for 5 days right now, and he has a wife and a kid. And
Yeah, that is so nuts. Those schedules are so nuts.
yeah, and at least they have like the comfy, lazy recliner chairs, and sometimes they get
Sometimes,
to chill. But
yeah,
sometimes they're running medicals 01, 04, and they just get screwed. So,
yeah,
no, it's a challenge, and I love what you do in talking about like taking care of yourself and wellness. And I've had a hard time saying no to things,
hmm,
but I've unfortunately had to try to tell myself that it's okay to say no, because usually everybody just wants to be a yes man, right? So
yeah,
it's like, hey, Greg, can you come start early and day shift's short? Yes, I got you. I'll push
yeah,
off my exercise tomorrow morning or the walk that I had planned with my dog to go and
hmm,
work and help out because I don't want to say no. So it's a challenge.
yeah. It's a lot, and I have heard these kind of conflicting views, and a really hard charging cop I know actually kind of contrary to a lot of the narratives now, because luckily we have more of this voice encouraging first responders to slow down and not burn out, because we know that all too well. I mean, just look around your department. If you haven't been there, someone working right next to you has, and it's probably going to tell you to kind of slow down. But I love this approach because, like you, I did take on a lot of special assignments. I'd be the guy that held over a lot. I didn't have a family for many years, right? And even when I was with my girlfriend, she was my girlfriend, and even though things were serious, like, she was really accommodating. She had her career too, so I would hold over, I would come in early, things like that. You want to be productive, you want to be helpful. However, going back to what this guy said, he's like, no, I think that when you're new, you should take the deep dive, like jump into the deep end, take on all this stuff, say yes. That's where you're going to learn and grow. Um, and then what I would offer or alter his that I suppose guidance is, yeah, at a certain point when you get comfortable and you have these competing interests and responsibilities, family being the big one, yeah, make sure you reassess and continue to do that. Make sure everything's serving, the whole, and the whole is like you and your life and your family as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. And something that came to mind while you were saying that is, yeah, I don't regret getting into all these collateral duties. I think I'm in like 6 or 7. Um, but like for my department, you hit that 2 year mark, and that's when you can finally start testing for like collateral duties or
Hmm.
specialties, whatever you want to call it. And right away, a SWAT position opened, so I tested for SWAT. I was fortunate enough to get that, and I also tested for the motor position, so I got the motor, so I was full time on the bike. And then with SWAT kind of comes like, oh, hey, like you're pretty savvy with firearms. Do you want to become a firearms instructor? We have a spot opening up. Sure. And then I would give a piece of advice to everybody listening is yes, it's like say yes and jump in, but in a few years, kind of evaluate and be like, hey, which ones are really important to me? And maybe stick with those. And like the honor guard, the drone team, maybe push some of those to the side, like actually sit and think about which ones you really enjoy and you can balance. So like in a perfect world for me, it would be SWAT, motors, and like range instructor, like those three. And I would be happy with those because you start adding in, oh, we have one training day a quarter for drone, one training day quarter for honor guard, one training day a month for SWAT, one training day a month for motors. And you see where I'm going with this. And
Yeah.
then it turns out that not only do I have military, so I'm working 11 days in a row. Well, our SWAT trainings is now on Fridays, so now I'm working 13 days in a row.
Hmm.
And it just becomes a lot. So it's kind of like that, those proactive thoughts and like reevaluation of the actual assignments that you want to do, can do while taking care of yourself.
Yeah, I love that. And when you said that, it makes me think about just taking inventory. Like, hey, what do you
Mm-hmm.
have on your plate? And with those things that you identified, certainly you're busy enough. And then you have the Overwatch Collective. We'll get to that pretty soon. But yeah, you have enough. And so I think that that is a good reminder that we should all kind of reevaluate all of our outputs, and what is it bringing, what's the purpose in all these things, how does it connect with our greater purpose, and like really what's driving us.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the same time, like organizationally, because I've done some different roles, and now I'm trying to always think about forecasting the future in our very young industry. And yeah, we have these really high performers. You're certainly one, I can tell very easily. but sometimes it is a challenge. It feels really uncomfortable, and it feels maybe not even attainable at this moment in time, but we kind of have to force this uh, recognition that other people have to take some of the slack. Like, organizationally, it's more helpful if someone else shares some of these hats that Greg has, because if you have let's just say you have a tactical incident, SWAT's getting activated. Wouldn't it be great if there's someone else that can operate the drone,
Mhm.
instead of Greg, because he can't do both, that kind of thing. So it's just sharing that, and then it also, for those up and coming leaders, it also generates more development. It might force that development if you want to look at it that way, which is a good thing for the team.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Thankfully, we have. I was on the team that started up like the drone, and now we have 6 or 7 people. So when we have like our fatality vehicle collisions, like I can focus on the collision, and somebody else can fly the drone around in circles. And then same thing for like the SWAT ops. So, but yeah, and even it's like some of the smaller departments, like my department isn't like super small, but some of the smaller departments, like you still have to maintain a level of training, and especially in California, like we do a lot of training through post, and like you sometimes you just have to take on these extra responsibilities. So
Yeah. Yeah. With all the stuff that you do, and I want to ask now so I don't lose track of it and forget, but uh, are there certain routines and rituals that you gravitate towards, or, it, the reason why I ask is that you clearly have these things that come up. So, looking at a guy like you running your life the way you do, I assume that you work out regularly, but sometimes things change. How have you learned to adapt with that? Because I think that is something that a lot of first responders grapple with, which is why I'm working on a course to help with that adaptable mindset and routines. And how do you structure that for not your common person that just has the 9 to 5?
yeah, and I've struggled with this. I'll be straight up honest with it. I'm not the one that's going to sit here and be like, "Oh, this is exactly what I do, and you should do this." And no, I'm fucking terrible at it sometimes. Um, yeah, just like the first responder and military side, things were busy, and then we started the Overwatch Collective, and I kind of jumped into everything that is talk, like feet first, and I was like, bringing my computer in the patrol car and like turning on the lights and parking in front of a business so there's no shoplifting while I'm sending out some emails trying to schedule a podcast, like bringing my computer to military training and doing all this stuff and trying to schedule podcasts. And even if it was late or in the morning, I would just try to make it work because I enjoyed everything about talk, and I was like, hey, I want to see this grow. And I definitely will admit this, I put so much effort into talk, that there were times where I sacrificed my health, my sleep. I mean, I used to have a gym in my garage, and there'd be mornings where I'm like, oh, I got to do this for a grant, this for the fundraiser, send out these merchandise packages. Like, I want this to be done well. I want people to get their merchandise quick. I'll skip the workout. And you know what's funny is it was always the workout that was the first thing I would skip, because
No.
because it was the easiest, and it was like, oh, that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Which I know is not the right thing, but I also went through a point and kind of getting over this now where um, I did so much with like little sleep that I was exhausted. So all I wanted to do was close my eyes for an hour instead of going in the gym. Like it was bad. So I'm definitely not one to sit here and be like, oh, I do everything perfect and blah blah blah. And I know I talk about mental health and physical health, but like no, I usually skip the workout right away and do other stuff. It's bad.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I appreciate the transparency with that, right? Because I think that sometimes, especially in today's days, we might be contributing to it in some ways where people follow along, they see this kind of online personality, like, man, this guy's freaking crushing it. He's full time LEO. He's doing all these things. Oh, he's running this nonprofit, helping people out. Like, how does he have the time? I barely have the time, and I think that very healthy recognition is you're a human and sometimes you don't have the time and these things are sacrificed. So I love you sharing that, and it's just a plug to look out for that Get Gritty course. But no, same thing for me. Like, for so long I sacrificed a lot, and health was one, right? And so not to I suppose cast shame on ourselves or anything, no, but they're lessons learned, and I'm actually glad that you shared that you sacrificed your workouts, because as a young man, like, I never sacrificed the workouts. I would sacrifice sleep, and I'd over caffeinate to the point where I
Mm.
was like nodding off, sipping coffee on the drive home. Not like way out of order. I think hopefully most people that listen to that recognize the craziness in that, the lack of sanity in that. Essentially, the fact that you're prioritizing your sleep over your workout, I think, is very, very wise. So just a little nod, a little health nugget for those listening. When given the choice, yeah, you gotta do that thing.
Yeah, and I tried to, and I still try to eat healthy to kind of balance that, right? Like if I know I'm not really working out that much, like I don't eat the McDonald's or all the fast food stuff. I try to eat clean or um and try to balance it. But
Hmm.
yeah, it was definitely some challenging times to like skip workouts, and I was exhausted some of the time. And I mean, same as you, like I'd be driving home and I only live 25 minutes away and I'm exhausted. And then I know the next morning I got to wake up, and before I have to leave for work, I have like a 4 hour window, and I have just like, I wake up to a to-do list of things. And then I do one thing, check it off, check it off, check it off. And then by the time I'm done, sometimes I'd have like 30 minutes for me to chill and relax before I go to work. And then it's nonstop at work and you have to be on your A game. So
Yeah.
definitely have experienced burnout.
Yeah. No, that's a great tip too, right? Like recognizing that half hour of sitting and chilling, uh, super helpful, right? Like our nervous system can only take so much, especially when you're redlining in the way that you explained earlier, which is working all these shifts and then switching into military mode. It's not like it's not really helping you with like the Kevin Gilmartin, like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna go down the hypervigilance roller coaster. I have 3 days just to recover. No, that's not really the case for most people, whether it's family, other obligations, overtime, house blunders and house projects and all that. So no, it's a great nod, and I will leave the listeners with something, because if we're just saying like how hard it is, I found a lot of success in looking at your routines and your need to do's on a weekly rather than like a daily, because it's really easy to fail the daily, right? Like I skip my workout, I get called in early, I'm holding late, I'm exhausted, I eat like 8 cookies in the break room at 3 o'clock in the morning. Now I feel like a giant POS and I like hate myself. Like, forgive yourself, right? Like you have this very uncommon lifestyle and job and requirements. Tomorrow is a great time. Really make sure you do everything you can, like winding down to get that good sleep hygiene. And then if you have a normal day the next day, that is a great day to get your workout. If you feel like absolute, you know, absolute crud the next morning, maybe that's the day you walk your dog for an hour rather than driving to the gym trying to, grind out, on like 3 scoops of pre-workout. That's
Mhm,
probably what your
mhm,
body needs. So just give
mhm.
yourself that grace and look at it more big picture. That's my biggest advice, I'd say, looking back, as I'm super close to 40, and telling my 20 something year old self and my 30 something year old self, and thus all the 20 and 30 something year olds out there, that's exactly what I would prescribe you do, because I know that there's something in you that's probably fighting that.
Yeah, and I'll actually give one piece of advice too, and it's funny that you mentioned 40 and I'm like 31. I have two old fashions, and I wake up the next morning and my back's killing me, and I'm hungover.
Yeah.
Um, but like if you have a big list of things to do the next day or something that my girlfriend taught me was what needs to be done, and prioritize like three.
Mm.
And then it's like the out of the whole list, it's like what actually needs to be done and what can wait until the next day. So that's something that kind of worked for me, just to pass on to all the listeners.
Yeah, I love that. It's relevant to police work. What's important now, right? Like, just like there is a prioritization of how you handle calls and what the need is, what the risk is now, and that can absolutely translate to your life. Um, I love that we went on this little chunk where we're talking about health, because whether it's sleep deprivation, I mean, all these things directly correlate with mental health. I know it for myself, where I wouldn't say, I mean, truly, I don't know, like clinically depressed. Um, I felt very depressed at times, and oftentimes I can know for a fact that it was correlated with poor sleep was the biggest one, and then with poor sleep, you generally have these cravings and poor nutrition and all these things. Um, so yeah, this is probably the perfect time to transition into talk, right? Like, so the
Mhm.
Overwatch Collective, please tell us about the Overwatch Collective and what its genesis is and was.
Yeah, so the Overwatch Collective was founded by myself and Jesse Coulter in June of 2021. So a background, you already know about me, but a background on Jesse. So he was in the Marine Corps for 4 years. He's actually in the Coast Guard Reserves now. He's doing active duty right now at the Special Mission Training Center. So he's training a bunch of people, which is pretty cool. We both unfortunately share something similar in that we've lost friends to suicide. And one drill weekend, actually, it was his idea. And he was like, hey, do you want to start a podcast? And I was like, I don't know what a podcast is. At this time, I didn't even listen to like Joe Rogan. And we started talking about it. And we're like, all right, what are we going to discuss? And we were going to call it Field Talk and then just talk about shit that we do in the field and the military and all the dumb stuff that you do, but then also the fun times in the barracks and everything. And I was like, hey, like I also have the first responder side. We both lost friends to suicide. We both know the stigma, the culture, wearing a mask, etc. Let's talk about that. I don't know many people that are talking about it. So we started a podcast and we hit the ground running with we had police officers, deputy coroners, service members, everybody within the field, first responder or military, and kind of talk to them about their profession, the suicide statistics in their profession, the culture in their profession, what they deal with that really isn't known to the public. Like dispatchers, for example, they have it really tough. And then people started donating and they were like, hey, keep this going. Like, this is nonchalant. Like, this is still the most laid back podcast. Like, I'm sitting on a half broken poker table and I have a flag hung up and I actually have like 2 boxes of 9mm that are holding up the flag. Like, it's the most low key laid back podcast. And we've always wanted to keep it that way, just to keep it raw and have fun with it while talking about serious stuff. But people started donating, and the first donation was $50, and it was to drink better alcohol because we were drinking Trulies. And then after that, it was like, hey, we're getting in quite a bit of money. Like, how can we better our community? So we turned it into a 501c3 nonprofit with the intent to fund therapy sessions for our first responder and military community with those donations that come in. So that was in August of 2022. So since then, we've been funding therapy sessions for our community across the country. We have our own contracted and vetted therapists, cover 48 states. We have over 115 therapists. So we've really hit the ground running with the nonprofit side, and it's cool. It's really rewarding.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that, man. I mean, for any listener that is new to you, they probably already hearing all the draw to service. You know, it's of your family. It's kind of in your nature. You know, you talked about what you and Jesse started it as, and I think that's a really cool thing to highlight on, right? It's not just two guys being like, you know, we need to do our part to, you know, fix the stigma and like raise money. Like, no, it started from a very different place in a positive natured place, right? Like, hey, let's have some conversations, and then quickly you figured out where it could go. And I think that sometimes we have things out of order where we make these really lofty goals, but I think that a lot of times what I suppose I'm trying to have people think about is like build it and then let things evolve and adapt just like you do with anything and continue to develop, and you'll find the need and you can find all these really cool opportunities to help a ton of people on these very kind of grassroots kind of themes, right? Like you're talking about the flag. I think the flag looks great, by the way. I don't do video for my podcast at this time, but whenever I hop on someone, usually they after the fact, especially the guys that I'm on for, you know, a bit, like the collective, the Canadian dudes, they're just clowning me on my blank wall. They're like, you still haven't decorated, huh? They probably said A, but you know. But yeah, I just want to give that nod because there's so much power that we have in just the stations of just trying to put out some positivity, and it goes a long way. But you guys are doing this huge thing now, but it didn't start all, you know, you didn't get there overnight.
Yeah, and we still look back on, and we actually had a board of directors meeting on Sunday, and Jesse and I were talking Monday, and we were like let's just kind of take a pause and look at like what we've done and what we created. And we always joke about it, and we joked about it in the beginning too. And we're like, we're just two like dumb Marines that eat crayons. We were both infantry, and like I applied for the 501c3 and it took me like 14 times. IRS kicked it back. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And we honestly just like kind of had fun with the process and made fun of ourselves, and people loved that on the podcast. And they're like, you guys rag on each other and you're so transparent with you don't know what you're doing. And we're like, yeah, we're not going to try to like hide it.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we started like figuring out a process to be like, all right, let's contract and vet therapists to ensure that Jesse or myself would actually feel comfortable seeing this person in person or via telehealth and talking about military deployment or going to a death by suicide or getting involved in an officer involved shooting or a SIDS death, and not having them be like, oh fuck, like that's what you see. And like the reaction where it's like, oh man, maybe I am messed up, I shouldn't tell this therapist anymore. And then if that's the case, in my experience, we've just lost that first responder or service member to therapy because they're like, hey, I heard this therapy thing was great and it was beneficial, but this therapist, I'm trying to explain my 72 or 96 hour shift on fire and how I have to cover somebody. And the therapist is like, wait, you work 24 hours? Like, that's not what we want. So that's not what we have with our therapists here. So,
yeah, no, that's a great couple things I want to rewind back. And one is just taking that pause to be like, man, look at how far we came. Like, look at where we started. And I recently had a colleague that kind of, asked that of me, like, where he texted me. He's like, man, like, you're writing like regularly with Police One. You got to call him now. Like, did you ever think that you'd be doing this? And it really just came from, I never envisioned that. I just wanted to write something because I liked putting my ideas on paper, and then it helped me, and I wanted to help other people. So I just like shared it out. And I think that that's a very powerful thing when you realize that it's one step at a time. And it's also, I'm glad you guys did that, because I think for someone that has, 18 other hats, it is hard to find that moment, but we really owe it to ourselves, not just like pat ourselves on the back, but to see how far we came can enable us to maintain momentum and remind ourselves of purpose. Otherwise, we, what I say with like Blue Grit anyway, is like, I don't want it to become the tail wagging the dog. Like, I want to remind myself of my purpose and the impact, because when I get just a very different example, but someone said that something I did helped them either be healthier or get a police job. Like, that's why I did it, not for anything else, not for, the likes or the downloads. So I love that you have this huge base of just contributing towards our culture in this very critical way. And you've grown so much. And again, like, I guess I want to focus in on something you said, which is that vulnerability that really resonated with people, just to be like, dude, we're two like, uniform personnel. Like, we don't know anything about a nonprofit, but there's so much power in that when you can plug and play any aspect of that, right? Which is to say, like, hey, I didn't know anything about fitness when I started like this job. Like, I knew a little bit, but it was all like bro sciencey stuff. And now I found something that works for me. And then for you, it might be like to the up and coming, tactical, officer that wants to get on the SWAT team. If you remember what it's like to be new and not know what you don't know, and just give some basic guidance, like, it goes so long away.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah. And then the next piece I really want to focus in on again was like that vetting process, right? So you gave really good examples as to why it matters and what that looks like for culturally competent clinicians, and like that alliteration.
Yeah.
But yeah, the last thing you want is you're talking about your day, you're talking about some of the things you see where you're causing some shock and some pause in them, and they're like, oh dang, like, well, no, okay, like, we're talking about me and my thing, but it's such a difference when you're talking about these first responder themes that you have someone that's competent in that. I have shared before, and I'll share it here real quick, but I was at a point in my life where I was just burdened by stressors, like life stressors. Like, career for sure was a huge piece of it, but more in the sake of like, it was career and balancing, not because it was first responder career, if that makes sense. So I ended up trying a general kind of men's health therapist, because I just needed to talk about like career, family, how to prioritize them. and that was really helpful for a little stint, right? But I think that when first responders recognize that they could use some assistance processing some first responder specific stuff, then absolutely, I do love that that example. So you gave a couple examples there. Is there anything else that you look for when you guys are vetting somebody? And by sharing that, I hope the listeners think about that either for themselves, or if they're like peer support, or they're just an advocate, that they can help walk
Hmm.
someone through that, or just give them a couple of these tips as they assess, or how they go about assessing some of these clinicians out there.
Yeah, and I think it's super important. You know, you hear the cultural competency, culturally informed. There's different things, but yes, essentially, I would say our messed up first responder and community, and I say messed up in the nicest way possible because we see shit and experience stuff that nobody else should probably see.
Hmm.
And then we have to go home and play dad or play mom and play husband, wife, etc. Um, so for us, kind of what we started with was prior first responder, prior service member, and that was just the easiest for us to be like, okay, this is somebody that was a firefighter and is now a therapist. Show proof that you were a firefighter, and then you're pretty much good. And then, hey, what kind of like certifications and training do you have? How long have you been practicing for? Um, and like, where are you licensed, or are you an intern, etc. And then we actually, full transparency, we had a problem where we were like, wait, are we doing enough? And we paused everything and we were like, we need to increase our vetting system and ensure
Mm,
that these people are actually like culturally competent and they're who they say they are.
yeah. When you say
Which was
problem, was that a specific clinician you got bad feedback or something like that?
yeah, and there was a little controversy between a few uh, therapists
Hmm.
and this person, no names or anything. And then when we kind of looked a little bit more into it, it was causing too many problems, too much work, and we're like, hey, you know what? This might be best for us to just go our separate ways.
Yeah.
Um, because we also have to keep in mind that, yeah, it's great to please everybody and be like, hey, no, it's okay. You could still be one of our contracted therapists or whatever. But if we have a little sixth sense that, hey, if a first responder or service member who's like on their last straw and is finally reaching out, and we connect that person with this person, then we kind of know like, oh shit, like I hope this works out. I hope this doesn't go south. Like we don't want that here. That's not what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
Um,
Hope's not a
so
strategy, right?
yeah, exactly. So, and we want the best for our community. And I feel like after that, we took a pause and we reevaluated. And now what we have is the best. And I'm very proud to say that. And it was all a learning process, right? Like we did, like what you just said, you don't know what you don't know. Um, and we're all volunteers. We're not therapists. We're like our entire board of directors just trying to do the best. So when we learned our lesson, we were like, okay, let's look a little bit more into this. Um, so now we have a whole vetting process. We have a checklist. So you have to provide licensure, or if you're an intern, if you're getting your 3,000 hours, depending on what state, you have to email all of that over to us. We can reach out to other people that you've worked with to kind of get a little more info on you. We look at like what podcast they've been on, their website, their social media, in addition to like specific training for first responders, like the Cortigo training for police officers. Like sometimes we have that Cortigo app, but therapists can also go through Cortigo training where they have to do X amount of ride along hours,
Hmm.
and they need letters of recommendations from the police department, sheriff's department, fire department, etc. Which is all new to me, right? Like I didn't know that therapists can get some of that. Um, so we definitely now have a thorough vetting process to ensure that, Eric, if you're going to be a top contracted therapist, like we can 100% say that myself as a first responder and or service member would feel comfortable going to you and sharing whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And there's a part that I just want to take a nod to the leadership lessons that you shared there, right? Like you can't make everyone happy, and you can't be worried about every little person's feelings. And one thing that sticks out to me is that I've heard is that you try to make everyone happy, you make no one happy, right? You have to be about what you're about. And what I heard in that is that you're recognizing like the end user and who you are trying to be of service to. And it's not the clinician, it's the client, right? It's the first responder, it's the military personnel, it's the person that is in crisis that needs the help. And ultimately, like, hey, if it didn't work out, you don't owe that clinician anything. They have other things they can do, absolutely, right? So I love that. And I also one thing popped in my mind where you're absolutely right. Unfortunately, sometimes you may have that like one shot, and you'd hate to ruin that one shot of like, now I guess therapy is not my thing. I guess it sucks. I guess it's like I'll never believe in it, right? Hopefully there's not that, and hopefully we can continue to socialize this notion, which is just like you should get a second opinion whenever you have like a significant physical medical diagnosis before you just go into intensive surgery or like go on like 15 medications. Hopefully you talk to somebody else just to get a sense of things, because it could be life altering, right? And so not my analogy, but I love to share that just because it is a huge deal, right? And let's not write off the whole practice, the whole industry, because of one poorly suited, or even let's just say maybe they're well suited for a bunch of other people, but it's so individualistic, right? We're all individuals that communicate and share things different ways. I might feel great about that gal and like hate this dude, and that's okay. Like, we'll just roll with it.
Yeah, and it's great too. A lot of our therapists, the therapist community, they're kind of that same way too, where they just want to help. So they'll be like, hey, like, Greg, if you're not vibing with me, like, that's okay. We don't need to continue, because you don't want to like not get along with your therapist, but just continue the sessions just to say to your husband or wife or department that you're in therapy. Sometimes it could do more harm. So a lot of our therapists, we've had instances where it's like, hey, Greg's not really a good fit for me. We're not a good match. Like, can you partner him up with somebody else? Or, hey, I recommended Greg to 3 other people. He's doing his research, like, just so you guys are aware. And we're like, cool, copy. Thank you. Which is really cool to see as well. I think that's important to share.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic, man. What's next for talk? Is that something that the board talks about? And feel free not to go into the weeds, but it is a curiosity of mine.
Yeah. So currently, as of what is today, November 14th. So we're actually in a holding pattern with accepting clients for financial assistance. And I'll kind of explain that. So, I think it's like the whole economy struggling, we've seen a decrease in fundraising, grants, etc. So, after, let's see, Giving Tuesday last year, we raised like 95,000. Our fundraiser raised around 90,000. So we had a good chunk in the bank, but 2024 was a struggle with fundraising, etc. So we were pumping out thousands of dollars a month in therapy. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist, right? Like, you're not getting any money coming in, you're getting money out. So around, I want to say it was like August or September, we kind of came up with like a hard stop number, where we had to pause therapy. And that was, for us, that was like $30,000 in the bank. So once we hit $30,000, we were like, okay, we have to do a podcast. We have to go on Instagram. We have to put this on our website. Like, due to a lack of fundraising and challenges with grants, we have to pause accepting new clients until we're in a financial place again where we can open back up. Thankfully, everybody understood, fully transparent with it. We don't try to hide anything here. And then the people that were actively in therapy through talk, we were still funding their therapy sessions at whatever tier, depending if it was the 50% tier or 40% tier, which I'll go into in a little bit, but we're still pushing out $1,000 or $2,000 a month. So, as of now, we're currently paused. We're working on some demographic pages. When you do apply and you get approved, that's something that we need for grants, which we're just kind of learning. Some of these bigger grants, you need all these demographics. And then we're trying to find a few more board members, therapist outreach members, and a new secretary, and just try to beef up our board. So I don't think that we'll open up therapy and financial assistance until we have everything on our side kind of solidified and we feel comfortable where we're at before we open up. And this is the first time talking about it. I haven't even talked about it on the Instagram story or our podcast or anything, but it would be a disservice to our community to say like, hey, yep, January 1, 2025, we're going to open up therapy. And just to, because we've said that, it's like stick with that timeline. And then we open up and we already have people on the waiting list to go to therapy through us. And then if new people applied, it would be a real disservice if we were like, okay, cool, accepted. And then come March or April, we were like, all right, we need to pause again and can't accept anybody. So we decided as a board, it's best for the community, it's best for us and those that are actually going to be going to therapy and trusting us with that process. It's better for everybody if we just wait until we're completely satisfied with where we're at, and then we'll announce that we're opening up.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. It goes back to like try to please everyone, you please no one, and it's quality versus quantity. So I appreciate that, and I'm glad I asked actually because it's just another reason why people need to pay attention and recognize this fantastic cause and how you guys could use some dollars, right? So some dollars can get some help to people. What are some of the ways that people can contribute, and how can they donate, sponsor, and such?
Yeah. So Venmo, Zelle, PayPal, on our website, once you go on, like the donate button pops up. And trust me, like we talk about it. We talked about it in the beginning. Like I know firsthand how much it costs, especially living in the Bay Area, how much my mortgage is, almost $6 a gallon for gas, etc., having to work overtime just to afford things. So like I've always felt bad about asking people for their money, their hard-earned dollars, when I know firsthand how much we make and how people are grinding for overtime, even though sometimes it's for a brand new firearm or a truck or a boat. So yeah, you can donate on the website. You can contact us and mail us a check. We're full 501c3, so we issue a donor letter with every donation, so you get a tax deduction. If you cannot donate a monetary amount, we do have our app that's available for Apple and Android users. It's just the Overwatch Collective on the App Store. Every download helps, and when we get around 1,000 people in the app, that's when we'll start to create some revenue through the app. And through there, you can do audio rooms, which is similar to podcasts. You have a social media aspect. You can contact some of our therapists on there directly. You have other podcasts on there that are only added by us and vetted by us. And then you have like professional blogs and stuff too. So it's kind of just a hub for first responders and service members in that app. And it's all controlled by us. So it's not like an outsider or anything. So yeah, those are ways to donate. And then as of now, are you good if I talk about like our current therapy stats?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So as of August, or since August of 2022, we've connected 260 people across the country amongst our first responder military community to our therapists. And the great thing about that is every single time we've maintained confidentiality. We've never had one person's department, military unit find out that they were going through therapy through us. And we're able to connect anybody to our therapist in a matter of days. Sometimes it depends on the person, because we have to get the submission, review it, approve it, send them the waiver. So there's kind of like an email chain that's going on, but we've connected people to our therapist as soon as 2 hours, and sometimes it's taken 5 or 6 days. So not going to sit here and be like, oh, we can get you connected to a therapist in 2 days, and that's our standard. Like it varies sometimes.
Yeah.
But so 260 people, and then we, when you apply and you get approved, we cover 100% of the cost for the first 3 therapy sessions. And then we go into a tiered system after that. So as of now, we've either fully covered or financially assisted 2,498 therapy sessions. And then we've spent a grand total of $265,476 on therapy. So So yeah, it's pretty cool every time we get a therapy statistic update. Like we're super excited about seeing those numbers and everything.
Yeah. No, that's legit, man. And I hear the sensitivity about money. I feel the same in a lot of ways, when we ask for things, but don't, for what it's worth, Eric to Greg, like, don't feel bad about asking for people's money for such a amazing cause. I mean, all those dollars spent, those are dollars spent on saving lives. Those are dollars spent on saving marriages, on saving careers, on saving, uh, kind of parental relationships. Like we all know people that are or have been in like estranged relationships because of this first responder dynamic, and it is this surreal thing, going way back to the earlier when you see all this heinous, abnormal stuff, and it affects, people that are not designed to absorb that degree of heinous, abnormal stuff. And so we need each other. We need to support this. So thank you for doing what you do. A couple things off, riffing off of that is, there we do have this inner first responder culture that's like, yeah, cool, I'm gonna throw some money at this. That's cool. But oftentimes and so frequently, we do have members of the community that are like, hey, how can I help? How do I donate to the police department? And we're like, well, we're a government entity, so like we don't really do that. But check your policies and all that. But I'll say, like, I'll offer this. I don't think it's weird to be like, you know what? There's a lot of first responder nonprofits that help towards, therapy and aid, trying to help people's mental health. The Overwatch Collective is one. They're on social media. They're on Instagram. They have a website. Like I think it's entirely appropriate to share that in the right context, especially when people are coming out of the woodwork, or people or people that they have businesses and they need to donate some money and they want to do it for first responders. Like what a powerful thing. So consider that, put that in your toolkit. Also, like, I don't I would ask the listeners, like, don't minimize the impact of just sharing that, right? Like, if you're on Instagram, follow the Overwatch Collective, download the podcast, share them out with your friends. Like, I say it, from my page, but it goes such a long way when people are just willing just to share, because you never know who you hit, and it helps the algorithm. It helps more people see it and get in front of it. So all those little things are huge too. And I want to give a shout out to your shop. Like, you can go to the website. You got some cool swag. You're wearing an awesome hoodie right now. I mean, the holidays are coming up. Not sure exactly when this is going to air, but I mean, gift ideas, right?
Yeah. No, I appreciate the shout out and everything. And it definitely does help sharing it. And we've always said from the beginning, and I probably should have mentioned this, is like where our name came from. Like the Overwatch, you think tactically or whatever, like you're in an Overwatch position looking out for your buddies. So that was us. We were like, hey, let's look out for people. So it was like, hey, we're in an Overwatch pause, and we're like, we got your six essentially. And then collective, it's like, hey, this is a team effort. And it's still to this day, right? Like there's so many other great podcasts, other nonprofits out there that we're working with, and like getting connected to a therapist is like our specialty, and that's our niche. But some other nonprofits, they have their specialties in other areas that we need. So it's great when people are like, hey, this is kind of what I'm looking for. And we're like, hey, like full transparency, that's not what we do here, but let me connect you to Travis. Let me connect you to Jennifer. Boom. So like having a solid network around this country, because like I quickly learned that everybody on Instagram kind of knows like each other in this community. It's crazy.
It's pretty cool.
And it's so cool when people are like, hey, can you post this on your story and ask this question? Or can you get me some help? And it's like, hop on the Instagram story and like, help, first responder looking for XYZ. And then people are like, oh, this person, and screenshot and send. And they're like, dude, thank you so much. And sometimes that gets overlooked too, just like those simple helps. But yeah, I think kind of as we start to like wrap this up, I think that's where you're going, but I really want to get out here the importance of this community. We all know, like the military side, the VA is always super backed up in getting to therapy. Sometimes it's 6 months, etc. It's very difficult for a first responder to raise their hand and say, I need to go to therapy. to go to the chain of command, to go through the employment assistant program, sometimes even the super confidential peer support team, people are just not going to do it. And then if you do it, your department knows, people know that you're going to therapy. Then you go to the employment assistant program. They connect you with a therapist that's not culturally competent. You finally go sit in that chair or you hop on a Zoom call and it's not a good session. Well, you just risked, as much as it sucks, your reputation, how people look at you, think about you, trust you, to not even have a good therapy session. So we pride ourselves on like skipping that entire process and coming straight to us, where one of our big goals, and I should have added this earlier, is to have 3 to 5 contracted therapists in every single state with a podcast attached to each of them. So Eric, if you're in West Virginia and you're looking for a therapist, but you don't want to go through your fire department because of this stigma and this culture, you go to our website and you look at 3 therapists that we have listed there, take a few days, listen to a podcast with them, go to their website, and then you can choose which therapist you want to work with. So that first therapy session is as much of a success as possible. So I just wanted to add that in there.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you did, because if you're in some regions or some PDs, you might be like, well, I have a lot of really good coverage, and hopefully this becomes more of a thing where you have those senior officers. I think the senior line officer that is willing to say in roll call, like, yeah, I use therapy. Hey, young gun, you should too. I wish I did it earlier. Like, that's where we need to get, but we're definitely not all the way there. We're far from it. So that's great if you already know that your department or your municipality or what have you has great benefits and it's not creating this negative stigma. It's not jeopardizing your reputation or your career. I have heard EAPs ranging all over the place on, like, I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. And you know what? I actually had a great experience with EAP. So I want to throw that out there. But all of the points of that Greg brought up is that, yeah, that doesn't exist everywhere. And if someone is debating and has to try to run the calculation of, is this going to create hurdles with me in my career? Is this going to create trust issues? Is the stigma too great in my culture? Yeah, of course, it's great to have this resource, this opportunity, and how many people you're helping and continuing to help and will continue to help. I think that's such a beautiful thing, man.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And yeah, if anybody is listening to this and you have questions, or as of now, like, we're not accepting people, but we can still provide resources and get you pointed in the right direction. Like, if you're questioning your employment assistance program or the VA, et cetera, like, we make it simple. Just Google the Overwatch Collective, hit us up and ask away. Like, we're just here to help. So
Yeah, I love that. Anything else you want to leave the listeners with, man?
No, man, I think that's it. Yeah. I think that's all I got. That's a quick down and dirty, but yeah, I appreciate you having me on behalf of the Overwatch Collective. I know I do a lot of these. I'm like sometimes like the face of it, but there are so many people that do amazing work behind the scenes that don't come on the podcast, that don't do social media posts, etc. Secretary, we have over 115 contracted therapists that our treasurer has to track, and how much they cost or how much they charge per 50-minute sessions, and all these people applying, and grants and podcasts and fundraising. It's a lot. So there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes that a lot of people don't see. So we're trying to do our best for this community, and I've lost too many friends to suicide. We continue to see these suicides on social media. The numbers still increase, and like, if we could save one life, like doing a podcast like this or the resources that we provided, and then that's mission success for us.
Yeah, no, that's critical. And thank you to you and your team. I'm glad you highlighted them, because I'll just share for those that don't know, like, if you've ever done any fundraising, like I sold t-shirts, right, for fallen officers, and it was so much. And that's just like locally, that's just like word of mouth kind of stuff. It's a headache. It's meaningful. It's worthwhile. But like, to manage to the scale that you and your team do, and that's huge, right? Like, anyone can recognize the administrative load of just simply that type of endeavor. So thank you. And I suppose lastly, this will be in the show notes, but where can people find the page, the podcast, and what's the website, just so people can hear it again?
Yeah, so the website is theoverwatchcollective.com, Instagram, the Overwatch Collective, the app, the Overwatch Collective. You're starting to get the picture. Like I said, we make it super easy. If you want to find us, just type in the Overwatch Collective. You'll find us pretty much anywhere. Podcast is all streaming platforms and our app. YouTube, we have our own YouTube channel. And that's everything. Just type in the Overwatch Collective and you'll find us. Hit us up. We're all super chill, laid back. We'll hop on the phone with you whenever and shoot the shit or point you in the right direction if you need.
Yeah, man. Well, thanks again, Greg. I really appreciate the connection and being acquainted with you and your project. It's what we need more of. And so thank you for leading the way in that respect. And please go get some sleep, man.
Yeah, appreciate you. Thank you once again for having me on, brother.
Of course. Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.